Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a look at a 7-round 2023 NFL mock draft for my Buffalo Bills. These are my favorite videos to do because I get to kind of blend what I love doing, working with college football, evaluating some of these college football prospects as they go on to the NFL, and then I get to talk my favorite NFL team, the Buffalo Bills, and more importantly, chop it up with the Bills Mafia in the comment section. Again, I appreciate all the support you guys have shown. Doing about one mock draft a week for the Buffalo Bills. So again, if you do enjoy the content, come back for more. We'll be running a lot more of these before we get to the NFL draft. And again, appreciate all the support Bills Mafia has shown. Without further ado, let's get into this draft and let's talk a little bit about what we have done, what we really want the Bills to look like in 2023. I think there's two things. Last draft we took Bijan Robinson with that 27th overall pick, and I'm not opposed to doing that. I mean, when you look at who is the best offensive playmaker in a weak wide receiving group, in my opinion, in this 2023 class, Bijan Robinson might be the, outside of a quarterback, the most impactful offensive player in this draft. Now, I think the Buffalo Bills have some other positions they want to address. You look at what we got to do to kind of get to the Super Bowl. I think the physicality on both fronts has to get better. So addressing some defensive line, addressing the offensive line, I think that is something you're looking to do. But again, if Bijan Robinson is sitting there 27th overall come draft night, which I don't think he will be, I think you certainly consider it. Let's see who falls to this 27th overall pick and get into the draft. Again, I think a safety would be nice. I'm looking at Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M as well. You look at some of the free agents. You have Jordan Poyer, who, as time goes by, Bryan Bresee falling to 27 is really interesting. Let's see if Antonio Johnson's still on the board as well. He is not, so no Antonio Johnson. I think you'd have to be looking at a guy like Bryan Bresee. I think this would make a lot of sense. We just talked about getting more physical and more athletic on the defensive line. Bryan Bresee, 6'5.5", 305 pounds. He had the second fastest 10-yard split at the combine this week, and the things Bryan Bresee has, you can't really teach. There was a reason he was a number 1 overall recruit coming out of high school. There's a reason before the season he was a top 10 draft pick on many people's boards. Now, ACL tear as a sophomore, the passing of his little sister from cancer this year. He had a kidney disease. He had pneumonia, I believe. He was really banged up. When you watch the film in 2022, it is a little bit concerning. But when you look at how rare it is to find an athlete who's as big and as explosive as a guy like Bryan Bresee, those guys don't grow on trees. And when you're looking at interior defensive linemen who you want to be able to provide a little in the pass rush as well, Bryan Bresee can certainly do that. His lateral quickness is next level. And he has traits of being a top 10 pick. And you go back and watch his true freshman film at Clemson, he would be a top 10 pick, maybe even a top 5 pick. If Bryan Bresee falls, which he certainly could, I think the Bills go up and get him because, again, that's what we wanted to address. We want to get the pass rush going, and we've tried a lot of edge rushers, A.J. Epinesa, Boogie Basham. Not saying those guys are bust, but they haven't really provided the spark that we're really looking for. Bryan Bresee certainly can do that if he falls to 27, which, again, I think he could because he really had a bad 2022 year on film. Pick 59. This is maybe where you go and check out what's available at the interior offensive line spot. Luke Weipler, I like a lot from Ohio State. Joe Tippmann. Andrew Voorhees is a guy that I'm really targeting. I think he's a top 75 player. I don't think he'll be available at what PFF has him ranked 131. But he's a guy that end of day 2, early day 3 is a guy that I think would be a really good addition to the Buffalo Bills in terms of physicality. Maybe we'll be talking about him as the draft rolls on. You have two guys who, I mean, I know it's doubling up on the defensive line, but holy smokes. One, Tommy Adebawore from Northwestern, tested out of this world. He has 34-inch arms. He's only 6'2", 283 pounds, but he is just bricked. I mean, he is yoked, and he ran a phenomenal 40, a great 10-yard split in terms of first step. Felix Anudike-Uzomah or Tommy Adebawore. I think Felix Anudike-Uzomah, God, he got two names that are really testing me here, I think would make a little bit more sense because I liked what I saw in the film more from Felix Anudike-Uzomah. But when you talk about traits, when you talk about some of that stuff you can't teach, Tommy Adebawore from Northwestern just absolutely blew up the combine. He has long arms, but he's short. So he plays with good leverage, but he also can get hands on you. A lot of times when you see guys who are 6 foot, they don't have long arms. He has 34-inch arms, longer than most tackles you'll see at the next level. I think you go Tommy Adebawore. You bet on the traits here. And again, you talk about pass rush. You talk about the ability to stop the run, getting more physical on the defensive line. Bryan Bresee Tommy Adebawore, we just did that in a big-time way. All right, pick 91. See, Karl Brooks would have been a nice pick as well. I would have really liked getting Karl Brooks. You take a look. If we didn't address the defensive line twice, Karl Brooks would be the pick here. You look at a guy like Tank Dell, and I'm high on Khalil Shakir from Boise State. I liked him last year in the draft. Tank Dell, you can't really teach what this dude's done, and you pull up how productive he's been at Houston. What's the first thing that stands out? 5'10", 165 pounds. That's why you're seeing a dude who is so productive fall this low in the draft. But look at this production. 12 touchdowns, 1,300 yards, and almost 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns. How Tank Dell wins, and I think we could really use someone like this, is he wins with separation, right? He's a 4.4, 4.5 guy in the 40. He's not necessarily a burner. He wins with quickness. He wins with separation. He's played all over the field. So I think you can play him on the boundary. I think you can play him in the slot. And when you talk about the Bills needing some more offensive weapons, some guys with some juice, I think Tank Dell is certainly a dude that if he falls to pick 91, which I don't think he will, but if he does, because teams are afraid of the 165-pound frame, I think you go up and get a guy like Tank Dell who's going to provide some explosiveness. He's phenomenal after the catch. This dude in his short area quickness is just on another level. He is gliding out there, and I think the Bills could use that because when you look at Gabe Davis and his development, it really hasn't been there. I like Gabe Davis. I think we could use another playmaker because, again, Isaiah McKenzie, kind of more of a speedster gadget guy as opposed to a pure wide receiver. Tank Dell is that dude. Now, we got a chance to talk about a couple prospects I really like. Michael Wilson, he's going to be really good. He's not going at pick 130. Karl Brooks, you also could add to that list. He's certainly not falling to 130. Karl Brooks, you look at what he's done, and Buffalo Bills fans, I think he would be a phenomenal addition to the Buffalo Bills. You look at he lines up, so he's 300 pounds. He lines up at Bowling Green mostly over the tackle or outside the tackle. His pass rush win rate, he's winning on one of every 4 pass rush snaps he takes. He's phenomenal against the run game, 50 quarterback hurries in 2022. This dude is a certified stud, and you see it on the film. Now, this is where I think you might take a look at this running back class because this running back class, I think this is the sweet spot here. DeWayne McBride, more of a pure ball carrier. Tank Bigsby, probably my favorite guy left on the board, maybe Eric Gray. Both those guys are phenomenal. Eric Gray reminds me a little bit more of James Cook. He's a little bit bigger, but that's kind of the skill set James Cook brings to the table in terms of getting out in space, making people miss. So kind of combining Eric Gray and James Cook, I don't know if I necessarily like that. Combining someone like Tank Bigsby, who at Auburn, the numbers aren't great because he ran behind a really bad offensive line, but he runs the ball extremely hard. He makes people miss. You watch this film, he's just making people miss because Auburn's offensive line can't block. I think Tank Bigsby, he was a former 5-star out of high school. He's a very physical running back. I think that would make a lot of sense when you're trying to get this run game going without having Josh Allen have to take all the snaps. Now, I think Michael Wilson, Karl Brooks would make a lot of sense. I want to address the offensive line at some point. Let's take a look at who we have on the interior offensive line. At that guard spot, I'm not high on some of these guys who are available. Again, maybe you're looking at tackle. Andrew Voorhees would have been a really, really nice pick. Taking a look at offensive tackle, guys who could maybe kick down to guard. McClendon Curtis, more of a guy that maybe we're targeting at pick 205. He's a guy that really physical dude who played tackle at Chattanooga. Didn't really have the athleticism to play tackle at the NFL. Take a look at this linebacker group as well. I think that's a position where you could add, or this cornerback group. Jacorian Bennett had a phenomenal combine. He has kind of the tools that you want. Let's take a look at this linebacker room or linebacker class, if you will. Dorian Williams, another guy who tore up the combine. Ivan Pace, you look at what Ivan Pace did. I mean, he was all over the football field. What's the first thing you worry about? 6 foot tall. He's kind of shorter, not the Tremaine Edmonds type, but what you can't really teach with Ivan Pace, what he lacks in that stature that Tremaine Edmonds and other guys like that have, is he is like the number 1 linebacker when it comes to diagnosing and seeing the football field. He flies around the field. He can do a lot of different things. He's a phenomenal pass rusher as well. And when you look at the Bills, what do you want to do? You want to be able to stop the run, get some pressure on quarterbacks. Ivan Pace is a dude who can do that. He doesn't win taking on blocks with physicality. He wins with beating blocks with speed and anticipation. Again, I love that in linebackers. When I think people get a little too caught up in give me the linebacker with all the traits. And even Tremaine Edmonds at times was kind of like that, where it's like this dude, you can't teach what he has with the frame and the size and the speed. At times, Tremaine Edmonds not necessarily diagnosing as much as you want. I think Ivan Pace Jr. has that. I think he's a guy that if Tremaine Edmonds walks to free agency, Ivan Pace Jr. coming in, he's probably starting right away because he's a dude that can fly around the football field. And at 139, you're getting a guy who's going to be a hammer in special teams as well. And at 205, if McClendon Curtis is still on the board, give me McClendon Curtis all day. It's a little bit disappointing for the Bills because they don't have as many picks towards that day 3 range that I would like for the Bills. And there's a lot of prospects I really do like as you get to day 3. Eric Gray would have been a nice little selection here. Trey Dean didn't test very well, 4.75 40. He's a guy that I'd be looking at. Let's see if they got McClendon Curtis still on the board, and they don't, but they do have Alex Forsyth. He's a good ball player. Take a look at this tackle class. Because, again, when you're looking at day 3 tackles, you can kick those guys into guard pretty easily. Man, this is not a great – there's not a ton of guys that I'm itching to go get there. Maybe take a – Bryce Ford Wheaton. You take a look at him. 6'3", 225, ran a 4.38. And that's another thing that you can't teach. Let's go get Bryce Ford Wheaton, the guy who can stretch the field. I mean, Gabe Davis stature, and I think he has the ball skills that Gabe Davis has, a little bit more physically gifted in terms of the size and the speed. When you talk about using Josh Allen's arm, I think Bryce Ford Wheaton's a guy that you could take. And he might not be after running that 4.3 at the combine, but he's got good ball skills. He struggled with some drops, but in terms of playing above the rim, going up and getting the football, that's what you like to see out of Bryce Ford Wheaton. Let's check out how PFF graded our draft. This is the best PFF draft I've ever gotten here. A, B+, A+ for Tank Dell, an overall grade of an A. Again, only 6 picks. The one thing I would have done differently if I were doing this mock draft again, and we'll do plenty more, is I would like to get someone on the interior offensive line, even if they're not starting right away. I still want to address that position. I think we can get more physical. I think we can get a little bit more dominant. When you think about winning playoff games in January, you want to be able to run the football. We didn't really get that, but we got Tank Bigsby. We got Tank Dell. I think those are some really, really good prospects that we addressed. That's a really strong draft for the Buffalo Bills. Again, appreciate Bills Mafia for checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, let me know in the comment section what you guys are thinking. We appreciate y'all for real, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.